Welcome, Josh. He's muted.
I'm muted. I'm muted. I'll try to make that sound as sincere as when it came out the first time.
I thought you said
Fred, it's good to see you.
Josh, I sent you a text.
You did. Give me a moment. It's a simple ask, but it's a bigger ask for me. So I just need a moment, but I think I can help with that. Yeah.
Okay, so I can announce that you're the one, you'll give us either a thought or a prayer.
Sure. That would be
Okay.
fine. Yeah.
Thank you. Do we have anybody else on? Just
This is the council.
unless we've got somebody on YouTube.
Yeah, I wanted to.
They've been sent information. Yeah.
That's all.
They've been sent a meeting invite. We'll activate them if they're on.
I got a little sign on mine that says this meeting is being recorded. Continually meeting. What do I hit to get rid of that?
Continue. We're going to record you.
Okay, very good.
We're on YouTube. Yeah. Can you tell how many people are on YouTube? You can't tell who, but
There's gonna be one.
Hi, could you-
There's gonna be one person on for December.
I don't have anybody there.
Audio check.
Yep, we can hear you. Can you hear us, Rob?
You can.
Great.
What are you sitting out in the middle of the street, Rob?
Background. I love the background. That's
You're
my
muted,
most
Rob.
favorite thing.
but I like your virtual background. It makes me feel like
Yeah,
you're
I
on
like-
vacation.
It's kind
I
of
like that.
dangerous.
Sitting in the roundabout
In the middle by the Christmas tree.
with all this quiet.
Okay, it is 6 o'clock. Let's start this meeting on time. I'm Kathleen Alder. I'm the mayor. We are currently in St. George. We're here in St. George to attend Utah League of Cities and Town. And so we decided to have our meeting down here. We have just a few agenda items. And we purposely don't have agenda items that we have to have a lot of people come into the meeting. So I think this will be a good thing for us. We have here in St. George, we've got Carrie Kirk, Janelle Seeley, and on Zoom, we have Jeff Nebeker, Josh Paulson, and Brent. He's disappeared off the screen.
I'm here.
And we've got Rob Stapley from the staff and Scarlett Bankhead from the staff. So we appreciate all of your attendance and we'll try to move this along. Carrie Kirk is going to lead us in a Pledge of Allegiance, and Brian will put a flag up on the screen. So if you would all stand, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, item number 1 is, excuse me. We have some opening remarks by Josh Paulson.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor had asked me to share a prayer or a thought before today's meeting, and I appreciate the invitation. I actually was thinking last night, I think it was beginning of the year, we had a man come and give a Hindu prayer before council. Does everyone remember that? I actually love that. I love that so much. I actually watched it last night. I just was curious what he had said, and I took time, and we're grateful to record these meetings on YouTube. So I was watching that last night. I wanted to share a quick thought by another Hindu man by the name of Maharaji. He's a Hindu guru, and it was an interaction with one of his students or followers that he had that I was just going to quote for our thought. The gentleman speaking is a man by the name of Ram Dass. Maybe you've heard him before. He was in a somewhat relatively popular movie these days called Becoming Nobody. But it said, he said, I asked him, referring to Maharaji, how can I know God? And he said, feed people. He said, that was such a weird answer that I assumed the translator screwed up. So I figured I'd rephrase my question. Maharaji, how can I get enlightened? And he said, serve people. And so I guess my thought is that we might be more purposeful and shift our focus from simply knowing God and becoming enlightened to feeding and serving people. And as we do so, those larger activities and goals in our lives will come to pass.
Thank you, and how appropriate, because the people in this room are serving the people of Providence. So thank you for sharing that. First item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. I will entertain a motion to approve.
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes from the previous council meeting.
I'll
Second.
second
Okay, the previous council meeting is from Wednesday, March 16th, 2022.
That's what I have on my sheet here.
Okay. Okay, so we have a motion to approve by Josh. Did we have a second? Okay. So we have a second by Carrie Kirk. Any discussion? All in favor?
Oh no, I'm sorry. I did have a couple things as I looked through there. The first one was regarding the amended motion that we had to fees. Line right about line 116, 117. I just want to be clear. We said money collected on the new water meter fee will be earmarked for water conservation efforts. I also requested at the time that I would just would like to review that annually. I just want to make sure that that is the case and that money is not just earmarked and not reviewed. I believe that was part of my request, that was the case. And then the other one I had was, so my notes are here. That might have been the primary. I had another one, but that was my only comment there. Let's go with that. Oh, I remember what the other one was. It was Brent Speth made a remark regarding, I think this was the one where we had what it was referred to, and there was supposed to be some updated language that was sent out to us and approved, and I just wanted to make sure that that had happened.
I sent it out. I think the mayor signed off on it.
Okay.
I saw it.
Okay.
Okay.
That was my only other comment. Yeah.
Okay, so any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 2 is Lateral Shareholders Water Exchange Agreement, and we've been asked to bypass that. There's one more step that needs to be taken on that with the water company, and so that will be taken care of in our next meeting. Is that correct, Brent?
Yes, we will have a board meeting. We're looking around the 1st of May, and we'll discuss this issue, and then we should be ready for our May meeting.
Okay.
Mayor, can I ask one question of Ryan? Because I read that and I know you don't want to have the full discussion on the lateral shareholder, but it's related to this, and I would just like to be aware prior to that meeting since we published it. Can I ask a question, clarifying question?
Yeah.
Ryan, is the intent of this agreement that a certain lateral or shareholders will essentially trade in their use of share water for pressurized culinary water. Is that a concept? I just wanted to see if I understood that correctly.
So that is the concept.
Okay.
So they would trade their shares into and receive culinary 75% exchange for that. And then we would take that water and the hope is that we would take water out of Broad Hollow Springs in place of that, so that we would get culinary water for culinary water, but it'd be better trying to better utilize the spring, but be able to take that back to the board. It was presented. I've talked with George. George Daines was the one who presented that to the city. We said, it needs to have the Spring Creek Water Board sign off on it. And so he's aware that it's going there. So anyway, that's what we're doing, but that would be the point, is to try to increase the amount of culinary water and kind of just exchange their distribution for that. And there's a very few laterals that would actually work on.
Yeah, and the reason I bring that up, Brian, and Brent might be interested to know this as well. I exist on a kind of an interesting lateral that's a terminal lateral that kind of has poor infrastructure to deliver that water. There aren't a lot of residents on there. I know personally, and I suspect maybe other residents there would be interest in pursuing something similar because it's a difficult lateral to service. So I'd like to at least follow up with you on that, and maybe there's another lateral that might consider something similar.
This is why the hesitation to move forward tonight is because there are ramifications that need to be explored, and we don't want to establish a precedence we can't handle, we can't deal with, because I know of others on other laterals. And so as we adopt a resolution or a bylaw or whatever we need to do to be able to serve what they're proposing, that we don't create a situation where others demand it, and we have addressed who's allowed to do it and who's not allowed to do it. So that's why it needs to come before the board. We need to have that discussion before we can turn this loose to move forward.
Good. Well, no, I have no issues with that process or anything. And, as a shareholder, I don't have any interest. I share that. And that's, maybe helpful for you to hear, Brent and Ryan to hear as well. So that kind of helps contextualize.
I appreciate that. Yes. Yeah.
So.
Just so everyone knows, this is the Spring Creek Water Company, as opposed to Blacksmith Fork.
Oh yeah, this is strictly Spring Creek. Yes. That's why the exchange, because it would be culinary water for culinary water. It's coming out of Broad Hollow when they allow us to use their shares to take extra water out of Broad Hollow. The gift back to them will be a quantity of water through their tap.
Thank you for tabling the item until you've got all your T's crossed and I's dotted. I appreciate not that we won't be involved in anything messy.
I agree.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll table that item and expect to see that on our agenda next month. The next item is Fox Hollow Improvement Agreement, Townhome Phase 1. The Providence City Council will review, discuss, and may take action on a development and public improvement installation agreement for Fox Hollow Townhomes Phase 1. Ryan, do we have anybody on here?
We do. Dan is on, and I've just move him. There we go. So at this point, just while Dan is getting on and connected into the panelist spot, what's come up is they have had some issues with the Fox Hollow Townhome development. As I understand, Dan can correct or Scarlett can correct, but as I understand, there has been some difficulty with getting manholes for sewer manholes, and so they have requested, and we have a draft of a updated development agreement. And the request is to be able to delay putting in minimum improvements so that they aren't required to do minimum improvements before a building permit is issued, but until certificate of occupancy. So not before the initial construction of the building, but before the completion of the building. The standard that the city has followed is to require minimum improvements to be put in place before building permits, and to have the contractor or the developer to bond for improvements, and be able, so that they give an assurance that they will complete the other needed improvements and needed improvements before the completion of the certificate of occupancy. So this would move the needle from building permit, so that's when you set your foundation. That's when you're setting some of those permanent things. And so this is a variance. I don't know that that's the right term. Thank you. It's a deviation. I should note our city attorney is here present with us. So it would be a deviation from our normal practice in our current city code. I would make sure that.
So that's correct. And so we had a number of discussions and a number of back and forth.
I wonder if you could come so that you can be seen. Just roll forward, maybe. Well,
Yeah, I didn't want to. I'll try. There we go. So anyway, and then we do have Dan on with us. I believe, Dan, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. In fact, Ryan, we've got, you should see Gavin Winslow there as well.
I don't have that.
Do you have him on there?
I do not.
Oh, you don't?
I do not. I have you.
Oh.
And I have no one else.
oh, there was a Dan.
You don't have Amy Walker, do you?
I do not.
Oh.
I have you. And
apparently my
promoted
representation is not representing.
I'm sorry.
So
you are the representation I have that has connected, and I've promoted from your connection into a panel so we can see you.
Okay.
To go past this and come back to it? So your people come? Dan?
I would prefer if we can do that very quickly. I can reach out and get them on.
Okay, well,
Okay.
We have one more item on our agenda, so we'll go to that and then we'll
Okay.
come back to you. How's that?
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so we'll table that for just a moment and come back to it. We'll move to item number 4 while Dan gets his people online. Item number 4, city recognition of Juneteenth as a paid city holiday. The Providence City Council will review, discuss, and may take action on recognizing Juneteenth, which is June 19th, as a paid city holiday. I'm going to let Ryan explain it to you, but it's a federal holiday and a state holiday. So that's what we're discussing.
So the last time that now just last year, Juneteenth was declared a federal holiday, signed by the House, voted on by the House and Senate, and signed by the President, declaring it. It was to commemorate the last days of the emancipation of the blacks out of slavery. So at this point, the federal government has adopted as a federal holiday. The holiday prior to that was in the mid 1980s, and then the one prior to that was over 55 years ago. So there has only been, and I'm going to tell my age here, but there has only been 2 federal holidays declared in my lifetime. And probably only 3 you have a little, but
Saying that I'm older than you.
you're at least a couple years older than I am, and you might have only 3. And at that point, out of a total of 12 declared holidays, there's been very few and far between declarations. And that's kind of my point to the picture there. The state of Utah, the governor did declare it as a state holiday. So this is a state holiday, federal holiday. Many states are adopting this as a paid holiday. The question is to try to be proactive rather than reactive. And that is part of what we are trying to work on. And so we have brought the issue and question to the council to allow you to determine if it's a holiday as you would like to see it and progress there, or not. And I don't think any of the staff are looking one way or the other. It's simply saying, we have had a declared holiday, and it is unique to have this. And so that's why we're bringing this to solve the issue before it becomes an issue, so that we just know. And so that's what's coming up. And happy to take questions. Question I did have, the city has, and it's fairly standard with most, the city has currently 12 paid holidays. And so those are in line. We do recognize all of the federal holidays except for Columbus Day. Columbus Day we don't do, and we have traded it or moved it around to day after Thanksgiving. So we have day after Thanksgiving and Christmas Day or Christmas Eve in place of Columbus, and another one that removes. And so, but we are currently at 12 paid holidays, and most state and city entities are in that same 12. So this is new. So anyway, that's kind of the question, and we're just curious what the council would like to do with it. So.
Well, let's open the floor for discussion. Those of you that might have questions, the question before you is this something that we as a city would like to adopt? So Janelle has a question. Go ahead.
I definitely think that the occasion is worth celebrating, but I wondered if one of the federal holidays could be changed to a floating holiday, so that the people who choose to observe it and celebrate can do that, and then we don't increase the number of paid holidays within the staff. I don't think that diminishes the recognition of the occasion, but I don't know the actual dates of all the paid holidays, so I wouldn't be able to say which one could be switched to a floating, but it sounds like Columbus is kind of a floating holiday now.
No, we have no floating holidays and floating holidays.
But Black Friday is not really a federal holiday.
It is not, but we have declared in policy that the day after Thanksgiving is a paid holiday, and that Columbus Day is not. So the problem with paid holidays or the floating holidays, and they're good in theory, it's true, but the problem is then you never know which one everybody's going to take. I think from my end, I'd rather not have it declared than have a floating one, because consistency, and then we know when everybody's on or off. Anyway, that's kind of mine. I would say don't worry about it if that's the issue. If you're worried about the extra pay, I wouldn't go to floating, but
How much paid time off did the staff get? Like in hours and days, or how does that work?
as far as PTO,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we couldn't quite hear that. Janelle, can you say that a little louder? It's a little hard to hear on the other end here.
Sorry, I was just asking how many hours or days of PTO do the staff currently get?
PTO has been a combination of the sick and vacation. So those with PTO that comes together.
Paid time off.
Paid time off,
We just need
right.
to define that, paid time off.
And at this point, it is a graduated scale based on the number of years they've worked. I believe it starts with 80 hours and graduates up as they work. And I'd have to pull the policy to see where that graduation and levels go. But our staff are allowed to roll over 60 hours of that unused leave into the next year, or it's use it or lose it. So we have a use it or lose it policy, and there is you can roll it into HSA, or you can roll it into next year, or you can roll it into a sick bank that you could use for FMLA. But we have a 60-hour rollover from year to year.
So in explaining that, Ryan, so I have 60 hours this year. I can roll it into an HSA or something of that nature. I can roll another 60 hours next year.
So the 60 is rolling PTO to PTO. So you can carry over. So on your anniversary date, if you have more than the amount you can roll over, then you lose that. Now you can put some in your bank, an HSA bank, because we don't do short-term disability, and so that's in place of that is the employee funded out of their PTO short-term disability, and anything else they would need for FMLA or any of those. We have that they can put into HSA or retirement, but as PTO, as paid time off, they can only roll 60 hours from year to year and carry that forward. So there's a few ways they can utilize some of that, but ultimately, if they have more than 60 hours, they can only roll 60, and it's use or lose it. So that is one of those. So it's not like they can build up a huge bank. So they're not building up a huge amount of leave. So we don't have a ongoing liability from year to year. But on their anniversary date, that's what we do is we cut that back to eliminate ongoing liabilities to build. So
And employees earn their time off monthly. They don't get like
by
80
pay
hours
period,
when they come.
right? They get it by pay period.
Okay.
So
And at any given time, they only have 60 hours in their bank?
no,
They have 120?
they can have 120, they can have more, but on their anniversary date is cut back. So at that point, their anniversary date is when that use or lose it triggers. Correct.
But they can still have a bank employee.
So they can build it throughout the year, but on their anniversary date, the day after their anniversary, they only can have 60 hours in their PTO. So anyway, at this point, I look at the paid holiday and I say, anybody's salaried. So you got 20% of your workforce is salaried. So it's not going to matter, right? It doesn't matter because you're not going to pay anything more. There's no cost to that. So 20% you have no cost to. You have a use or lose it, and you probably have, another ones that either have that holiday off and recognize as it off, and if they want to take it, they could take their PTO to take the leave, but at that point, it would be if it's paid time off, they're off work, so you're either going to pay them to be at work or pay them to be off work. And I would say that your true cost would be minimal to have a paid holiday off to match to the federal holidays.
So I'm in the camp that staff rapport is really important, and I think we're in a tough labor market, and I think a rejuvenating day off in the sunny month of June could do a lot for rapport and for productivity. So that's where I'm standing. Like whether they have other vacation leave or not, like let's have a happy staff.
Rob, would you ever weigh in on this? Tell us what your feelings are on this.
Sure. I think I'm kind of standing in the same place Carrie is there when it comes to staff rapport and following kind of what the other realms out there are working on trying to adopt a new federal holiday. It is kind of a unique thing, like Ryan said. So I'm not opposed to it. I kind of like it being a day that you can plan for as opposed to the floating one as well, even though the floating ones have some very, very nice ideas there. But in a management aspect, it's nice to know and be able to plan ahead accordingly.
Okay. Do you feel that will affect your, June's kind of a busy time. You're opening it up, it's getting going, busy. How do you think that'll affect your, your ability to get things done that you want to get done?
Well, it'll put everybody a day behind, there's no doubt. I'm going through that today because I had yesterday off and it's been quite the day. So there's no doubt that whenever you take a day off when things are as busy as they are these days, that you have to play catch up. But that just means you work double hard to make up for your fun day. Right?
We're getting 10 days paid leave, and we're getting 12 holidays out of a year. So we're getting 22 days for the basic employee starting out.
Correct.
Yeah, something like that.
Okay. I just want to make sure that what we go for doesn't negatively affect what the production or output needs to be for your staff and crew.
It's a busy time of year, no doubt. But like I said, I think we've got really good staff, and playing catch up is no fun, but everybody enjoys a day off too. So I'm kind of on the fence. Whatever y'all decide is going to be great.
Would you ever need to have somebody work that holiday to cover?
Our on-call situation goes the same way with every holiday, but at least one thing going good for us in that realm is the fact that it is June and not a winter month, because winter months are the most difficult when it comes to snow removal and such. So the on-call is much busier in the winter months.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, any further discussion? Are we ready for a motion?
I would be happy to make a motion. I make a motion that we approve item number 4, the city recognition of Juneteenth as a paid city holiday.
Okay, we have a motion by Carrie Kirk. We have a second? No second? Okay,
Can I ask Josh and Jeff to share their thoughts?
I was just wondering, can we accept this or recognize it as a holiday as a city, but not a paid holiday? I don't know, just a question. To Ryan, I guess.
So I guess in that one, you wanted the city to recognize it as a holiday. So is it a day the city staff would work, but we'd still call it a holiday?
Yeah,
I'm just curious
we're just recognizing it as a holiday, but not a paid holiday. But
I suppose you could do what you'd like.
Can I? Let me turn mine off.
I think mine's down.
Okay. Can I make one comment? there was a time when we did not have Martin Luther King Day as a holiday. And it wasn't a thing that was pushed by the staff or anything, but we did have citizens that let us know that even back then we weren't showing enough diversity. So I think that's one thing that maybe you need to think about is what the public will think. I'm usually not one that really pushes that drum, but I do know that we did go through that over Martin Luther King Day 10 or 12 years ago.
Well, this morning I was in a meeting. We were talking about housing in Cache Valley. And I heard the statistic that there are 4,000 open jobs in Cache Valley. We need to keep our employees. Rob, how hard is it to get people so that you get good people and they're trained and they want to stay?
Yeah, they're slim out there right now, that's for sure.
They can walk out of the job and find another job, making another 20 cents an hour or whatever, and they will do that. So time off is something that's valued by this generation of workers. I have no problem giving them an additional holiday that's recognized by the state as a paid holiday and by the federal government. I think it's a small price for us to pay because to train new employees is terribly expensive. But I think it's something that we ought to do to show our workers that we value them and we want to keep them.
Ryan, why do we not honor Indigenous Peoples Day the same way we do as the other federal holidays?
It's a good question.
And just to clarify for everyone, President Biden, who under his presidency proposed Juneteenth, also recast Columbus Day as Indigenous Peoples Day to honor the people that were here in this country before we were. And I think it's clear, what happened there. So I'm just curious why we don't honor that day.
I don't know the answer to that. That wasn't a day that was here when I got here, and lots of dropped Columbus Day for some reason.
Well, just to be clear, I don't think it's called Columbus Day anymore. I think it's
Indigenous People Day. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, Indigenous Peoples Day. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that one. Scarlett, has it been a previous day that was changed or accepted at some point?
Well, actually, there was a time when people didn't want to know. People kind of lost track of whether Columbus actually discovered America and all that kind of stuff. And so now that President Biden has changed the name and turned it more of a political type thing, that's something maybe we want to rethink about. But when we started doing this, it was quite a while ago when it was just Columbus Day, and the schools didn't break for Columbus Day, and so we kind of felt like maybe that was a day that we would rather spend time with our families the day after Thanksgiving instead of Columbus Day, since the kids were in school anyway. But it didn't have any political ramification back then when we first started doing it.
If that's something the council wants to explore, we can certainly do that. But tonight the question is, are we going to have recognized Juneteenth as a paid holiday for our city employees? So we have a motion.
I guess, Kathleen, I think, Mayor, excuse me. I think the point of my question was relevant just because I had heard several different arguments for this holiday, including one of which our employees need another day off, and that would be good for morale. And then Scarlett introduced, talking about MLK Day, that this might be a diversity thing, and why we'd want to do that. And so I'm kind of asking, is it the multiplicity of reasons here, or is there a leading reason that we have a new federal holiday to celebrate Juneteenth, the emancipation?
I brought this one because it was a new federal holiday, and just brought it up because a lot of cities get talking about it, and it's getting closer. And I just wanted finality on what the council wanted to do. You have seen not necessarily a recommendation from staff. We're happy with what we got. If you want to, great. If you don't, it's fine. No pressure either way. I just brought it up to have finality, because the question's worth talking about and having a decision on. That's what I'm looking for, is a decision, not plus or minus decision. From mine, and I think, Ty, are you in the same boat?
Yeah.
And I think you heard from Rob, and he was the same. I think if Scarlett said, hey, don't mean to speak for her, but I think we're all in the same. We just want the decision made. It will, no pressure from the staff side.
Do you have it in the budget for this year? You talked about this year.
I would say that it won't cost, other than our on-call that we already pay, and that I would say it's not going to cost much. It's the same day we catch up, we have to catch up, but we have the day off, we get paid for it, or we work the day. So I don't see it being a significant cost at all.
We just become extra productive the rest of the week.
So
I don't know if this matters for anything, but the courts are closed on Juneteenth, so we won't be having court on Monday. If it falls on a Monday, we won't have court on.
And it will this year, right?
Yeah, because it's a Sunday this year, so it would fall the following day probably.
Would I'm just curious. I don't know. This is a strange agenda item to me for some reason. I've been thinking about it a lot. I understand the reason for the holiday, and definitely believe in the idea behind the holiday. I guess, I don't know. Like someone mentioned a floating holiday. If the staff would rather have, some other day that would work better in the month of June, or some other day during the year that they could take this paid holiday. No, I don't know.
I think floating holidays become difficult to from a management perspective. It's like, well, is this your holiday? Did you put it in? We can plan for them, prepare for them, schedule for them, but so I think if you're looking for saving $1, I don't know that you'll save much, but certainly can not approve it. And I think this is just an up or down. Do you want to celebrate Juneteenth or not? If you don't, it's fine. If you do, it's fine. I think it's just a question that rather than be reactive and have this come up and have people celebrating and it's like, well, why don't we do that? Or it just gives finality. That's really all that I think we're looking for is from staff, is just make a decision which way you want to go. And we're happy with that. We're happy with whatever you decide. We really are. There's no pressure.
So first motion failed. So I'll entertain another motion if you want to do that.
Well, I've been thinking about this too, and obviously other council members have as well. So I appreciate, and those who voted for it or abstain from saying anything. Regardless, it sounds like everybody's thought about the issue. And, I'm really grateful for that. And I've thought about it myself and trying to kind of be reasonable and trying to think about, different places I've worked, be it, state employees, university that, like when I was at university or Utah State University, we didn't get Veterans Day off, everybody worked on Veterans Day, but that's a federal holiday and our city observes that. And so there doesn't seem to be complete conformity with federal holidays. I think that's evidenced by our own practice of not taking off Columbus Day or as they'd say, Indigenous Peoples Day, either one of those. And it's been really thoughtful for me because it's kind of begged the question that I've often asked myself, are holidays just a day off for me and I enjoy the time off work, or which those actually, have some additional meaning to them, and I think back of like 4th of July, where I love to take the day off and meet with my community and have a pancake breakfast and fireworks, or Memorial Day, where we like to, take the day and go visit cemeteries and things of that sort. So I really, really love and appreciate what this holiday stands for. It's extremely meaningful to me as a defining moment in the history of our country. And I overwhelmingly support it with that. But I do kind of question, well, which holidays are we going to take off? To Jeff's point, we certainly want to recognize them. Which holidays do we take off? And it made me think about, well, boy, if I was Native American and I didn't celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day, that would be kind of offensive to me. That'd be pretty hard because when we kind of came to America, we really raped this land and all of its resources and the people here. So I guess my thought was maybe, I don't know if floating would work, but maybe to create some greater harmony with these other holidays and what they stand for, and recognizing, these groups of people that deserve our honor and respect, sacrifices they've made. Do we trade in MLK Day for Juneteenth? I've been at several places that I don't get MLK Day off, or for corporation. Do we reinstate, Indigenous Peoples Day, which I think is an important message that, we're actually overlooking, an important segment of our citizenry as well. So I just my thought was maybe in order to kind of get this work, maybe June's more desirable than a January holiday to some, and maybe we honor Juneteenth and MLK Day we could let go, and maybe we could reinstate Indigenous Peoples Day, which I think creates greater harmony with the people in this country that probably deserve our respect and admiration. So a couple thoughts I've had.
I have another thought for you, and maybe this is something, I don't know all of it, to Jeff's kind of point there. What if the office is closed but not a paid holiday? So at least at that point, the public, it's shown as a holiday, gives the staff, I mean, it's as good as a working day to catch up. And that's a step in it. What if either Indigenous people and Juneteenth are holidays that are the building's closed and the staff still work? I mean, does that address some of that? I mean, I'm willing to see where a compromise is if that's what you want.
I spoke for quite a few minutes there. I'd love to hear from someone else. Those are just thoughts that I've had in trying to, honor and respect, these important holidays, and at the same time providing, the necessary flexibility that holidays frequently do for families and people at work, and just trying to kind of strike the right balance. So
I'm not a super rich business person, but I do know that people who feel valued and take a break work better when they return. I feel like it's not costing us anything to say, we value you enough to give you a break. And we know that it will be fine. You'll make up for it. If I were voting tonight, I would say give all if it were up to me tonight, I would say give them all federal holidays. They'll make up for it. These are humans that don't need to be cuffed to a desk or to the shovel. They'll work harder the next day if they've had a refreshing day with their family. And it feels like we're being greedy in needing them to be at the desk to prove that they're working. But I feel like if we give them a break, they'll do even better and they'll perform even better.
Carrie, I don't think I think we're actually approaching this from different perspectives. So I don't disagree. You know as well as I do, I have an extremely, we offer a lot of freedom in our workplace for that very reason. And I work a lot, but it is really rewarding. The things that I stated more had to do with, have we struck the right balance, with why federal holidays are actually put in place. I don't think they're put in place to give people a break. Well, they serve that function, but I think they do for very specific, memorable reasons and to honor, particular groups. And I'm wondering if we have the right balance. So I don't disagree with what you said. For me, I'm kind of trying to look at it from a different angle.
Well, and today one holiday is brought to the table. So we could talk for 2 hours about the philosophy of federal holidays, but what's been brought to the table is Juneteenth. Do we want to allow the staff to have Juneteenth off or not? So maybe we could have another motion.
Yes, and just to be fair, that you've stated your opinion and you expressed it, and there wasn't a second. So what we're doing now is,
Josh, what's your motion?
I left my opinion. I was waiting for someone else to comment on what I'd said, because I'm still formulating my thoughts. Is that okay?
I have to agree with you, Josh. I think that we may ought to take a look at such as MLK Day and say, okay, it's winter. We've got snow on the ground. We got work to do in the winter. Maybe that's not a good time to take a day. Maybe we look to honoring that in June or another time of year. It depends on what we're trying to accomplish here. Are we trying to conform to the federal government? Because there's other days that they have that we are not honoring, as you mentioned. What's that?
Do you have a motion?
I don't, because I didn't second the motion, and I didn't second it for a reason.
No, a new motion. What do you want?
We need a new motion on this.
Okay, I will make a motion how I personally feel about it. It seems like, and if it dies, it dies, because other people won't feel the same way. I feel like there's probably more discussion to be had. But if it was up to me, I'd probably trade MLK Day for Juneteenth. And I would instate Indigenous Peoples Day, because I believe it's an important holiday to honor all groups equally. So my motion would be to go ahead and make Juneteenth a holiday, to remove Martin Luther King Jr. Day from our list of holidays, and to instate Indigenous Peoples Day as a holiday for the city. That's how I feel about it. There's my motion.
That's not on the agenda.
Probably not noticed on the agenda.
I'll second that.
The only problem with that is not what is on the agenda. We can put that on another agenda and have that discussion. Tonight, the only thing that's on the agenda is, do we want to have Juneteenth recognized as a paid holiday for our employees? The answer is yes or no.
Okay, and Kathleen, I think, Mayor, I think that's been answered. Just to be clear here, I think that was asked and answered when it wasn't seconded. And then you said, does anybody else, and we could read the minutes, does anybody else want to make a motion? So I did what you asked. I guess I could, yeah.
The motion would be up or down.
Continue it for
We
further discussion.
either continue it for further discussion on another agenda.
Sure, I'll make
We've
a
got our attorney
motion.
here, and that's what the attorney is telling us. That is not on the agenda.
I'll make a motion that we just keep thinking about this and put it on the next agenda next month.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion to continue this discussion and be a little bit more specific on what we're discussing.
So can the next one, address, could we notice the other holidays?
Okay,
Okay.
we've got a motion by Josh, a second by.
No, I did
Jeff.
not make a motion.
Oh, I'm sorry. Jeff made the motion and Janelle seconded it, I'm sorry. So now we can have some discussion, questions.
So can we notice, I mean, I'm not opposed to what Josh's motion, there just has to be notice on that, the attorney here is telling us. And so maybe we can notice that we'll be addressing paid holidays, all paid holidays for the staff.
Change.
I like the flexibility of that.
Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we're going back to Dan. Question? Dan, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, and I believe Gavin is on now. Is that right, Ryan?
Amy is
Yes.
on.
Amy is on. Oh,
Amy is on by phone and I'm on by video, so we're both
all
here.
right.
Okay. Ryan, do you want to give us the rundown that you gave us before real quick, just to catch everyone up?
Sure, I'll try to. So at this point, the city is, as a standard and as our code, we require minimum improvements being water, sewer, and road base and curb and gutter to be installed as that's what we define as minimum improvements. Water, sewer, curb and gutter and road base. So that's the extent of what we define as minimum improvements. We require these minimum improvements to be installed and inspected prior to the building of the issuance of a building permit. What is being asked is a deviation to allow ironwood development to be allowed to delay the minimum improvements and begin get a building permit prior to minimum improvements. But the minimum improvements and all improvements would then be required before certificate of occupancy or before somebody moved in. I would caution that sometimes people move in before certificate of occupancy. That probably won't happen here, but I will tell you, we've had an issue.
They'd be posting a bond in lieu of minimum. That's their application request.
Yes, that would be in addition to the request. The request would change the goalpost and in order to accommodate for that, yes, you're correct. That would be putting in a bond in place of doing those minimum improvements.
We had a significant amount of discussion with the applicant, counsel for the applicant, myself, and a significant, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
It's our city attorney.
Not very well online. Needs to be a little louder, please. Thank you.
Where's the microphone at?
I think it's here.
Is that better? Can you hear me better now, sir?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, you can see my tie.
That's
There
I can
is
see how well you
software.
trimmed your beard today. Here's mine. Yeah.
I'm 6'6", so it's hard to like. So my apologies. So we had a significant amount of back and forth with legal. The legal analysis is pretty straightforward. This is a PUD. The PUD requires a development agreement within the Providence City Code. The development agreement then therefore must comply with all aspects of LUDMA, the Utah Land Use Development and Management Act. Within LUDMA and ombudsman a couple ombudsman opinions, it allows the applicant to choose between a bond and minimum improvements. The question that has been the focus of this is what is minimum improvements? The legal advice I can give you is you can hold them to minimum improvements to anything that's within the fire code and the building code that is clearly allowed and authorized under LUDMA. There is gray area and some risk that is assumed when we start asking for minimum improvements outside of those. And that's been the crux of our argument and the battle that we have had between Amy and I over the last week, and what minimum improvements entails and what can be held to. As we spoke, the applicant would like to move forward and draw their building permits, and staff, myself, Scarlett, and Ryan all decided that it would be best to bring it to the council and have the council make the decision based upon the level of risk they're willing to assume in the situation and circumstance. So obviously your risk is based upon if you approve the development agreement as they've asked, there would be a risk of having to go collect on a bond and then finish the improvements if they're not done, or some type of improvement would be done in a way that drainage wouldn't be done correctly. Let's say a house is built lower than the sewer and the storm drain. You run that risk in the neighborhood. The other risk is that we go to the property rights ombudsman or district court and get an opinion of whether or not the code complies. And that takes time and resources at that point. So it's really this body's decision to decide which risk they're willing to accept at which point. And obviously I defer to Amy. If I miss something, if I misquoted Amy, please correct me. I'm always trying to be academically honest with my legal opinion and be objectively right.
Can I ask a question? And I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
My name is Mike Green. I'm covering for Chad Woolley today.
Oh, you are. Okay, Mike.
Yes, Mr. Woolley's out on FMLA.
Yes, great. Hope he's doing okay. Section 500 warranty bond, the question 511, developer agrees to tender the city a warranty bond in the amount of $27,215, which amount is not less than 10% of the estimated cost of the construction of the public improvements. Does that mean we estimate the public improvements to be at more than $270,000 or so? It's just 10% is the bond price. Am I getting it?
Josh, we needed to get the development agreement out, and Amy had prepared her revised agreement. And we knew at the time, whether we made a change or not tonight on this, we knew that that bond amount had to change. When the developers proposed their first bond, they made it an error. And so the bond amounts will change. Depending on how you decide tonight, then we will put the appropriate bond amount.
So that's a placeholder.
It's based on the cost estimates.
And I would specify that there is a difference between the improvement bond and the warranty bond. So the improvement bond goes in before the improvements are constructed, and that would actually be for 110% of the warranty amount. So we would be placing a bond for somewhere in the neighborhood of $300 and something thousand to cover the public improvements. And Dan and Ironwood have also agreed to bond for private improvements, which isn't required under LUDMA. There is some gray area in the Providence code about what are necessary and essential private improvements. The minimum improvements, I know city staff feels that they're necessary and essential, and we don't disagree with that to the extent that we are willing to provide a bond amount for those as well. So not only would there be an improvement bond for the infrastructure that needs to be completed, there would also be a warranty bond to ensure that if something goes wrong, there's funds to correct that.
Amy, I gather by your response, are you an attorney representing Dan and representing the applicant, or? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I would like to speak to that, if I may. Having been involved somewhat in the building industry and some of the issues that we have dealt with, and also in the fire aspect of it, anytime you start deviating from a standard that the city has previously adhered to, with the times that we're dealing with now, could first off open the door to many requests for such as the same. And we could get into some issues that I don't think the city ought to be involved in, trying to take bonds, solve problems put in minimum improvements if something fails. If that's one aspect of it. I just don't think that's the city's job to take care of stuff like that. The second aspect of it, when it deals with fire, you start framing a house. We all know that framed houses burn just as well as completed homes. And if you don't have the minimum improvements in, you may not have water within a sufficient distance. You don't have a fire truck that can get to that structure. And if you're trying to drive across other lots, then you've got mud to contend with during rainy periods or how long this might go. And so the other thing is that when you put in sewer and water, the sewer goes deeper than water. Water is higher than sewer. And so therefore you're going to have a major disruption to your streets. And you can't get water in until you got sewer in, unless you're going to run it in the backyard, and they don't do that. It's got to be out in the street. There's also minimum improvements such as trying to get power lines behind the curb, gas lines into it. These sort of things, there's a reason why the city has the ordinance in place the way it does, because it brings forth orderly development for the lots. And therefore, when those improvements are in, they can build. And then when they're finished, they can sell them. And you start getting the cart before the horse, and it really leads to a problem. So my recommendation is that we do not approve this request. And that is my position as a city councilman.
I don't know if it was made sufficiently clear, but the issue that we're asking is actually the legally correct interpretation of LUDMA. So the current Providence ordinance is in violation of LUDMA. So we're not asking for a special exception to the Providence ordinance. We're asking Providence to comply with state code, which currently Providence does not.
Well, then perhaps maybe we ought to address our
Amy's interpretation.
code and see what we got to do with the code to comply before we make a move ahead with what you're asking us to do. Because I don't know where we're in out of compliance, and that ought to be something that the city council addresses and reviews before we move ahead with your request. So you're telling us that we're out of compliance? Yes, maybe we need to get into compliance.
Well,
I just point of clarification. Sorry, Amy, you kind of had your moment there. Ryan, you had said something. I just wanted to make sure I got it. You said code interpretation. Is that because we feel the section of code is up to interpretation, or like prima facie, we're just out. We're just not in compliance?
This is the conflict we've had all week, trying to discuss and figure out what the exact ruling is. The applicant has a position that the code violates. I think that we are within a gray area by extending the doctrine of fire code and building code. And so obviously the minimum improvements that they're asking to do is just basically the fire code minimums and the building code minimums. And we're asking for a little more broader sense due to life safety.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify that because Amy seemed to imply that that was actually the case. And currently the city attorney's position is that we're in a gray area and it's not entirely clear.
I think we disagree, actually. So, Michael, correct me if I'm wrong, but we both agree that Dan is entitled to post an improvement bond and that we can bond for the full amount of the improvements. Whether or not you guys can continue to withhold the building permit as if there might be a violation of fire code and building code, I think that your guys' position there, there's still a gray area. Dan has been talking to the fire inspector and the county building code chief officer throughout this process. If anytime there's a violation, building permits can be stalled. But right now, the main thing that we need to do is to get an improvement bond in place, which I don't think we have a disagreement, Mike, about whether or not we're allowed to put the full improvement bond of 110% of public improvements in right now.
We do not pursuant to the Ombudsman Opinion 152, which I agree with the paragraph. I think it's paragraph 5 or 6. I'll have to pull it up. That says it's the applicant's option. But the Utah State LUDBA allows us to hold the applicant to building, fire, essentially life safety before we issue the building permit. And that's whether or not how broadly that applies is a matter, would be the issue that we bring in.
But even the LUDMA decision that you cite
is for a preliminary plat.
Is for the recording and selling of plat and not for building permits. So it's really still not as clear as Amy would make it out to be. It is an argument that can certainly be made. It is not the direction which we have historically taken, and historical precedence has been that we've required minimum improvements on all subdivisions, whether it's public improvement or not. So we are asking for minimum improvements, and some minimum improvements would still be required. Now, understanding that landscaping and other improvements can be bonded for. And that's one thing that we've had in ours is our code doesn't specify the option when state code does. So there is some gray area that I would say we're trying to figure out. And as part of the judicial responsibility of the council, it's yours to figure out whether you want to accept, where you want to accept it within the gray area. And I think there is some.
How much risk do you want to accept?
Yeah, well, this is tough. We don't make a lot of judicial decisions as a council, I don't think, and that's why
it's not really a judicial decision. This is an administrative decision on the code, and the decision this body has to make to exercise its administrative authority is do you want to accept the risk of allowing the applicant to post a bond and draw a building permit now, or the risk of going before the property rights ombudsman and getting a decision. So that's really kind of the two angles you're at.
I'm still a little bit confused, Mike. We should be able to post our improvement bond now. Whether right now the issue before the city council is to get the DA revised so that it is not in conflict with LUDMA. We're not asking you to revise the code, and the decision that the city council makes today is not to give us a building permit. The decision that we need now, which is not in dispute, is that we need to be able to post the improvement bond and therefore apply for the building permit. We've been working with the fire department and the building code department, and if there is something that comes up that is not in compliance, we can address that. But we've been doing our due diligence. We are confident that the improvements to this point are in compliance with the building code and in compliance with the fire code. But we're not asking the city council to give us building permits. We're asking the city council, as LUDMA requires, to allow Ironwood to post the improvement bond.
What is LUDMA?
The Utah Land Use and Management Development Act. Sorry, Mike. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I'm not familiar with the details of this. And so it sounds like a legal battle. And you're asking us as a council, as lay people, that's not familiar with the details of this, with your attorney, our attorney, and your attorney. I mean, in all honesty, what are we doing here? I mean, we're trying to decide which attorney's right. No, I mean, what are we trying to decide here? Where is our role and what's our responsibility?
Your role is to decide whether or not you want to accept these changes within the development agreement as the administrator, exercising your administrative authority.
So as I read the state code and the city code, I feel like striking the city code basically strips our right to enforce the minimum improvements of water and sewer. But she's arguing
Till occupancy.
Well,
it moves it from, so it moves the ball down the road from issuing a building permit to occupancy, so we can enforce everything at occupancy, not at issuance of building permit. So the fate of the building.
So we've had gray area with that in the city because our building inspector is with the county.
Right.
And so if the building inspector says that it's good to go, people think they're okay to occupy the premises. So that makes me a little uncomfortable.
Well,
I
and
would
Because we
say,
have two agencies working on the occupancy and the building permits. And the communication between the two is not always very clear to the homeowner. And we're certainly not trying to put potential residents of Providence or in a bad position. And I don't think we want to put the city on the hook to put in the improvements either. So I do feel like, sort of like Brent does, I feel like I'm in a rock and a hard place. Like, what does the statute of the state really, it will only allow us to enforce fire and building code. And Brent, you were a building code inspector. Did water and sewer fall into that purview at all?
Well, when I was involved with it, generally the sewer went in and it was deeper. So if you're trying to get if you're building a house, framing a house, and they're trying to install a sewer line, and you're trying to get a fire truck down the road, what are you going to do? And if you haven't got your sewer in, undoubtedly you haven't got your water in, because that's going to go in, lay higher and 10 feet separation from your sewer line. Okay, all that's got to be tested. All that's got to be flushed. I mean, the water line's got to be flushed. The sewer's got to be inspected and tested. And you're going to start putting lines into property. And that most generally, yes, you can put in a foundation and stub it out to the property. And all that has to be done before it can be connected up. It's just, it's a convoluted method of trying to do a development and build houses in it, to get the cart before the horse. I'm not saying anything about curb and gutter. I'm not worried about that, but you've got to have a road that you can get a fire truck in. If some worker falls, you got to get an ambulance in there. You have got life safety issues that deal with construction, and you need to get people in there to take care of those things. Now, in my opinion, that means that you've got to have a passable road for the weather conditions that you're dealing with. And I mean, this is going to move into another winter, and you've got to have a passable road. And you've got life safety issues with construction workers. It's not just occupants. It's not just somebody's children are there. You've got to have that taken care of. And so to take and go that route is a convoluted way to go about it. And as a councilman, I would like to know my legal position, because I am not in favor of moving ahead with things that would be life safety issues without having those improvements taken care of.
I have a question for Dan, if I might. Dan, how long will it take between now? Originally, it was sewer manholes that were on back order. How long do you have before you can start and put in minimum improvements?
Well, if I can interject a little bit from a builder's perspective as well, I'd like to comment on a couple of things. Number one, the blanket comments that are made over just a blanket of development, and the particulars of this development don't comply or don't apply with all the comments. And I think that needs to be addressed and known, that the fire marshal has been, consulted on this, as well as the county building department. And there is a Four Seasons Road there currently, and there is an active fire hydrant there currently. And those are the two things that should comply for building and fire code for any of this to be. And so we're not asking for a permit on all the buildings. We're asking for a permit on the one building that complies with that.
But just to clarify, this development agreement is for all, and not just for the one. But you are asking for all, but I get that you were initially asking for the one.
You can issue individual building permits for individual buildings within a common development. And so that's what we're doing. We're looking for one building permit to start. To answer your original question, our best estimate is we have another 5 weeks before our manhole parts are delivered. And then we have about 6 weeks to install before we'll pull a permit. So we're looking at a minimum of 3 months still. And we've been dealing with this issue since early February.
And we apologize that it's been as long as that. We are on the third attorney to be on there, and that has delayed us, and it is true. So there is a delay, and you are correct, and we apologize for that delay.
And again, what's before the city council now is not a request for building permits. What we're asking for is for the development agreement to comply with the state code, which is binding on Providence. We just want to be able to post our improvement bond. Right now, there's development activity and there's no improvement bond. That in itself also puts the city at risk. So we just need to address the bond amount. We need to be able to post the bond. And as we apply for building permits, you're still entitled to withhold them if they do violate building code or fire code. This motion right now is not to overturn the Providence code. It does speak to the fact that it violates LUDMA, but if we need to be able to post the improvement bond. We've been being held back from that since the development agreement was originally approved back in December with the portions that violate LUDMA. But basically we're stuck. The issue that we're at is behind the building permits. We're stuck on an issue that prevents us from even getting to the aspect of building fire code and building permits. We need the development agreement so that we can post the improvement bonds and we can start moving forward to the question of building permits.
Can I ask a question?
And if I could just add to what Amy has said and maybe phrase it a little bit differently, this development agreement is not binding on the city in any other context with any other applicant. And this doesn't really address any conflict in the code in any other context. It doesn't take any position as to whether or not the city's code complies or doesn't comply with LUDMA. It simply, from our perspective, makes very, very minor red lines to an already approved agreement that would remove the conflict with LUDMA from our perspective and allow the city to not be in violation and allow the developer to move forward without the continuing damages from that this delay has caused. LUDMA allows the developer to choose, do I want to post the bond or do I want to put the improvements in first? And all the developer wants to do is post the bond so we can continue moving forward without delay. And it's looking at the actual red lines that are on the table, they are exceptionally minor.
Except the consequences of changing from building permits to occupancy permits creates a big window. That consequence creates a big window.
But that doesn't guarantee that we get to pull building permits before occupancy permits. It just means that we're not bound under the development agreement to the portion of the code that we disagree with. Would you agree? I mean, it doesn't mean that portion of the city code is all of a sudden gone.
May I ask a question?
I know you can't.
That's going on with the
I know you can't just obliterate our city code, but you're essentially telling us that we're not in compliance. But my question is, with the minimum red lines that you've added here, why is it that you couldn't post your improvement bond when the initial development agreement was approved in December? Why do you need these changes to post that bond?
Because we're not willing to agree in contract, because we can agree in contract to something that's stricter than the law permits. The law doesn't permit this requirement that Providence is trying to impose by contract. We don't want to agree to it by contract because we dispute that it's valid under the Providence
code. So it was
code.
not adopted in December then?
They didn't sign
It wasn't adopted. It was approved.
Not approved and adopted in December?
This council approved it, but they never signed it.
Right.
I see.
So I just have one question because Brett brought up some good ones. I do feel like, I know I'm in an administrative action, but it feels like I'm in a judicial role here very much. So I'm listening to two attorneys argue their points. Our attorney, it sounds like in instances like this, I like to go to the professional and say, do you have a recommendation? And I'm inferring from how you've been discussing that you don't recommend that we do this. Is that accurate? That's the vibe that I'm getting.
I can't, this is a matter of your discretion. This is not one where I get to give,
You can't advise us as our legal counsel.
well, I can, but the risk is yours to accept it. I get to tell you a path and I give you.
Yeah,
two
so
paths,
I
and
want you to
get
quantify that risk. I would like you to quantify that risk for me, so I feel like I can make that decision better. Can you quantify that risk?
Yes, option A, approve the development agreement, and the risk you have of any litigation is zero, but the risk to approving this creates a risk to having the cart before the horse in development, and it creates a risk of likely having wonkiness happen in the construction.
Okay.
The risk,
Can you also tell me? Okay, so you can elaborate on that risk just a little bit. What is the? I mean, some bad scenarios that may happen that we may find ourselves in.
The house gets built. You have a house get built below the grade before the storm drains in, and somebody's basement floods continually because there's a mistake that was made before the storm drain was put in because they went vertical.
Okay,
before the
thank you. That's helpful. And the city likely bearing liability for that with the homeowner.
Potentially, you'd have the governmental immunity in the way in a lot of aspects there, but there's that problem.
Okay.
But you bear zero risk with the applicant right now.
But
right?
we've had that situation occur on First North. The first house across the street from where Second West comes in did get put in ahead of all the improvements going in. The sewer was not deep enough. The basement flooded. We had lots of problems. We finally had to dig down and put a French drain in and drain it down to other main sewer line. We've already covered these issues. It's just, and we had another subdivision where we allowed the developer to move ahead and the whole road sunk because they did not do due diligence in taking care of. They were putting it in piecemeal, and the sewer line sunk and the water line sunk. And we had that on Gateway Drive over there where some was compacted and some was not compacted decent because it was being done piecemeal, a little bit here, a little bit there. There was no consistency. There wasn't consistency in inspection, the minimum improvements, and all that sort of stuff. And we have been in 3 messes that I know of because of the very thing that you're asking for.
Okay, so thank you. Great. But the other side of that risk, are we likely to enter into litigation here if we were to deny this development agreement?
Yes, and then you have ongoing damages, as Ms. Walker has pointed out.
Well, don't we need to resolve our code before we make that final decision then?
Well,
The development agreement would supersede the code if we have that issue.
right. Well, again, I feel like this isn't getting clarified. The development agreement would bind us to something more than what we think the code can require. The development agreement does not require the city to issue building permits where building code and fire code have not been met. And where there's arguably parts of the minimum improvements that are required for building and fire code, the development agreement does not require that building permits be issued. All the minimal red lines that we've done to the DA is remove the parts of the DA that violate LUDMA and allow us to move forward with posting a bond.
Okay.
I'm a little bit confused as to why it's being presented as this is going to require the city to all of a sudden do things that violate fire and building code. That's not the case. We're just asking for the development agreement, which is required under Providence code to just be able to move forward in a way that's clearly legal.
Okay, Amy, can I ask a question? There's the legal issue, and it sounds like there's an impasse there, and we're trying to sort through that. So I know that's your field, but let's put that in a sandbox over here for just a second, okay? And let's just talk practical business for just a moment. Your major beefs with the development agreement, is this going to cost you a lot more money to do this in accordance with as it's written? And with Providence City Code, is that the objection here? What is the issue with you complying to a standard that may be beyond or above what the state code is? I'm trying to quantify that too, because at the end of the day, you guys want to get your building built. I mean, I look at Gavin and he's like, dude, let me go ahead and build this. What do we need to do? You're going to weigh those costs as well. So tell me what your beef is with that.
I think Dan can probably speak better to the technical and logistical issues involved in the development. Dan, can you?
Yeah, the main concern here is just we're in an unprecedented time where we have a massive influx of growth in our area, and housing is at a high demand. And the longer this delays, normally this doesn't become an issue because we can get our parts and we can go to work, and then it's a few weeks or a month, and we have your minimum improvements met and we move on. In this situation where we have a supply chain issue with the parts to put in some of the infrastructure, where we're waiting 4, 5, 6 months for some of those parts. We could be building, in this situation, slab on grade townhomes that takes 7 months to build, 8 months to build. We could be building that at the same time as we are waiting for our parts and putting in our infrastructure and meet at the finish line. And in this world where the longer we delay, the longer we don't buy our materials for building, they're ever increasing, and it just increases the price for the end consumer.
Okay, so this is so your issue is you want to get it done quickly because it's costing you a lot of money, and there's some market timing to get it done quickly. That's the issue for you.
Yeah,
and you don't feel, with dealing with the triple constraint here, time, scope, and money, you feel like this development agreement constrains you too much to be able to go ahead and meet those meet your business needs. Is that correct?
The way it was written, yeah, the way it was written, we want to follow more to the state code.
Okay. Now, what we can acknowledge here, if we litigate, that's going to cost us more money and more time, right? I mean, we acknowledge it. That's going to slow it up either way, correct? I mean, I don't know how long that'll go on, but I suspect that's not going to help your case any, and we're not going to want to do it either. Are we in agreement on that?
I think, just to interject, Josh, I think part of the other issue is there are damages that accrue because of those delays and increased costs and increase. So yeah, litigation is not what we want either, but the end result of litigation may be to recoup some of the damages that the delay has caused. And that's not something that I think that's not something that we want to have to go through. And I don't think something Providence wants to have to go through. It's not just a sort of a zero sum, is there a time thing? It's that this is literally costing money by forcing the delay onto the developer here, and by allowing the developer to move forward as it would be under LUDMA allowed to move forward. That sort of avoids any kind of damages question on behalf of the city. Some of the concerns have been raised with like basements, flooding. That is irrelevant to this particular set of townhomes, which are not going to have basements. The concerns that are raised are kind of generic concerns that really aren't related to this attached townhome product that Dan is trying to build.
Okay, and Amy, your position is that the constraint of the chip that the city holds of the occupancy permit should be enough assurance for the city that we could control the safety of at least the occupancy, but as Brent brought up, maybe not the construction. Other than what Dan says, Dan feels that there is a Four Season Road and a fire extinguisher that would accommodate if we had a worker that was injured on site. Fire trucks would be able to access and assist the person.
Right. So we would be able to, we would just be eliminating the restraint on building permits that is in violation. Allow us to pull building permits only when that building would comply with fire code and building code, only in that situation. So we're not asking for, and the occupancy permit is actually something that's also not allowed under LUDMA, but that's something that we'd agree to as an assurance to the city that we're not going to sell anything that isn't safe, that isn't habitable, that hasn't complied with the minimum improvements. So that's just an extra assurance. We're willing to bond for the private improvements. We're willing to allow the city to withhold occupancy permits. We just want to be able to start pouring foundations and doing some work while we have these supply chain issues, which LUDMA allows us to do, and the development agreement currently, as drafted, currently doesn't. And it's an imposition that Providence isn't permitted to impose on us.
Okay, and does the warranty bond provide us insurance of the road that you put in from sinking and, you know, the other infrastructure? That's the reason that's there and in place. Is that correct, Amy?
Right, the improvement bond and the warranty bond both.
All right, I think I know enough, but thank you for letting me ask so many questions. That was, at least I can feel like I can make a decision now where I did not feel like I could do that 10 minutes ago. So
My question is could we tailor the development agreement to allow you to go to a certificate of occupancy with your first 1 or 2 buildings and then come back later? Or just the first one?
Well, I think the development agreement, that's exactly what it would do. We're not going to ask this, there's nothing in the development agreement that compels Providence to provide building permits. We can only apply for the as comply with building and fire code. That's
right. I agree with you, but I'm asking you if we could add 3.112A and say this is for only the certificate of occupancy is only for the first building.
the certificate of occupancy.
Yeah, for the first building, and then the rest of the buildings will comply with minimum improvements. So they can work on the first building, but the rest of it, they have to wait until I'm just trying to split the baby.
I guess I'm a little bit confused. We can't get a building permit if it doesn't comply with building and fire code. I guess
right, but I've already been told that you already comply with building and fire code right now. I spoke to the fire chief, I spoke to Aaron, and I spoke to Paul on the phone, and they said
that one building.
Yeah, for that one
But
building.
for the other buildings, they won't.
Right.
Right, and we're not asking for the building permit. So I mean, we can explicitly say that we apply for building as the chief building inspector and the fire marshal or the fire inspector have given their approval that they pass building and fire code and are fit to begin construction.
So if we make this exception, can we get an indemnification clause that any sewer and water problems are on them?
That would be up to them. That's a question for them.
Dan and Gavin, would you be open to an indemnification clause? You've already provided your verbal assurance that you're not going to, you don't want to mess this up.
I feel like that's an exaction that goes beyond what the city's entitled to ask for. I mean, there is a warranty bond quite literally, but providing some kind of indemnification moving beyond any kind of statutory period, I don't really, I guess, understand the scope of what kind of an indemnification would be asked for.
What's your hesitation though? Why the hesitation with your work regarding that? I would think if you felt confident about
well,
it.
If there's a sewer backup 5 years down the road and it has absolutely nothing to do with the developer, but the city looks back and goes, "Oh, looks like we've got indemnification right here. You guys deal with it."
Sure. Well, we can change the scope to make that work. I mean, we can change the scope to something reasonable. This is not about what we're entitled to. This is about coming to something that's practical so you guys can start developing and the city feels comfortable with risk.
As soon as we go to an indemnification clause, that's going to kick this out 2 months anyway, because it's not like we're going to draft one right here in the city council meeting, right? So asking for indemnification is the same as kicking it down the road for 2 months. And I don't think that's a reasonable proposition either. And so it's not that I don't think we could get there on a clause, but it's that we already have an agreement that was approved by the city council with absolutely minor distinctions. And the city still has the ultimate hammer to say, nobody gets to live in this house. Nobody. We're not giving an occupancy permit if these improvements haven't been done to the appropriate standard.
Yeah, sorry, Gavin, you need to understand we're coming off a bit of a stinger from 2 months ago where we're holding an occupancy permit on someone else too for something that was built that's unsafe and unsightly as well. So
is that a developer or is that a homeowner who built an extension?
That's a homeowner, which means this problem could be tenfold, So
I think the situations are different. The developer is going to get themselves in breach of contract, not be able to sell a habitable home if they try to sell this to an end user that's moving in. I think it's apples and oranges, but nevertheless, right now the city is taking a position that we can force you as the developer to do actual improvements rather than post a bond. And state code and the ombudsman's office says that is the choice of the applicant. The developer gets to choose, hey, do I want to do these first and not have to bond? Or do I want to bond so that I can get rolling quicker? And all we're saying is, let us pay the bond so we can get rolling. We're not asking for some special consideration beyond what state law allows the developer to make that choice. We're saying we're willing to agree in this development agreement to more than LUDMA allows the city to require. But it's still, but even so, we get to get rolling sooner and not have the 5-6 months of delays that this might cause the project. And so it's not unreasonable. There is some risk in every direction, but there's no benefit to the developer at building a bunch of townhomes that have no road out the front, right? They're not going to be able to sell them. And so we're not asking for a big favor from the city. We're not asking for the city to take a position that binds it in any other context. All we're saying is don't hold us up. You still get to approve or disapprove building permits. What we're saying is we don't want to agree not to be able to even apply for a building permit.
Can I get an answer on whether or not we can agree to do this for just the first phase, for the first building?
I don't see I don't see what the distinction is there, because as it is,
I do.
we only get to apply for, we're not going to get approved for anything beyond the first building under the way it's drafted.
Then why not put it on paper that says we're only going to do this for the first building, and then you get the rest of it after the other ones are done.
It matters to the people in this room who are voting to have that assurance.
Okay, well, can you propose some language so that I can evaluate what that language would say rather than?
Well, I'm trying to get agreement in concept before I come up with language.
I mean, I think what you're saying, and Dan is really the one that would have to sort of be okay with that, is that you're saying that under 3.1.12, you're just sort of carving out a distinction, making it everything else is pre-building permit, and only for the first building it would be occupancy permit.
Yes.
I guess, Dan, do you think you're going to be have all the improvements in before you want to pull a building permit for subsequent buildings?
Well, when we're talking about fire and building code driving the issuance of a building permit, the plan for this community is to build these townhomes. There's 5 buildings and build them in sequence. And so we want to roll from one building to the next building and roll the improvements with it. And so if we ultimately, we're never going to get past Paul with the county in any kind of inspections. If there's no road, no sewer, no sidewalk, no water, we're never going to get past an inspection. And that's where the occupancy permit comes in. All those things have to be there. And that's the assurance that the city has, the occupancy permit. That's all that we need. That's the way it's done in every city and county I work in. That's the way LUDMA reads.
That's not how it's done in about 7 cities I represent and the council I'm on.
And I'm not going to speak to that. I'm just saying that as buildings become available to meet building and fire code, we should be able to pull a permit for those.
Okay,
Dan.
I'd like to make a comment. I've just talked to the fire marshal of Logan City, Craig Humphreys, and in times past, when I worked for the fire department, they allowed non-combustible construction ahead of minimum improvements. That would be footings and foundation. And so they did pull a building permit restricted to footings, foundation, concrete floor, maybe underground plumbing. But from the combustible construction, the fire department is not willing to sign off on combustible construction until the minimum improvements are there, so they can deal with the issues that might come with a fire on the structure. So now rather than say an occupancy permit, let's modify it to deal with non-combustible construction. You can pull a permit for that. Non-combustible construction, you can put every foundation and footing and floor and underground plumbing in while you're waiting for your improvements.
Dan, what do you think about that?
Well, I'm going to ask the definition of minimum improvements, because the fire marshal is going to say that he needs a 4-season road and a fire hydrant to be able to move to combustible construction. And I completely agree with that. I don't argue with that at all. And so if the fire marshal and the building inspector deem that it is acceptable and it is safe for what they need to do, they should be the ones that turn the building permit loose.
That would be beyond combustible construction, yes, or non-combustible construction. That would give you a building permit for combustible construction when they deem that the minimum improvements are satisfactory to life safety issues and fire issues.
And I don't think we need to debate that. That's what the code says, building and fire code.
We all agree on that one unanimously. There's no qualm on building and fire code.
And I have a question for you. If you get a building permit on the building 1, Brent brought up the point of when it comes time to install the water and the sewer lines, then that may damage your all-weather road. So how would you handle that? Would you stop work if you damaged the road to the point that it was no longer met the fire code standards? How are you going to handle that type of thing? And one other question that well, it's more a clarification. We talk about 2 different bonds, actually. There's a performance security and there's a warranty bond. And it's been talked about that the warranty bond is the thing that we're looking at. Actually, it's the performance security, whether that's a bond or a letter of credit or whatever. There's all kinds of options that the developer can do as long as they meet some criteria. So we're not talking about warrantying anybody's work at this point. We're talking about performance security. That's what they want to put up at this point, is not necessarily the warranty amount, but definitely the performance security. Isn't that correct, Amy?
Yes, that's exactly correct, Scarlett.
And where you say you don't want to pull building permits, you do want to pull building permits as soon as the fire marshal and the building inspector say that you meet the building code and the fire code requirements, not necessarily the added requirements of like stormwater protection that Providence City throws on there, right?
Right, like things like curb and gutter. And I just wanted to clarify, the DA would not compel the Providence City to do anything that would be in violation of building or fire code, which it feels like that's kind of how it sounded, but yes, that's correct, Scarlett.
Okay, I hope maybe that helps clarify some things for everybody, but Dan, you didn't answer my question yet. So what would you do in that situation?
Well, and that's the reason why we're requesting this in the first place, is because this development is in a unique position where it has an existing fire hydrant, and all we had to do was push in a road and we meet building and fire code. And this road that we've pushed into building 1, the first building, has no sewer or water trenches coming into it. They all come in. It's kind of a U-shaped development, and they all come in from the other part of the U. And so this road has no trenches in it, and so it will never have an access problem or an ambulance or fire truck access problem. And so with the use of a fire hydrant and a 4 Seasons road that's not being trenched, that's why we feel like we should be able to pull a permit. And again, we want the development agreement in place, and I think that's our point, is we want to do this systematically, but that's this particular building's situation.
But with that said, it matters a lot to me that we clarify that it's building 1, because it seems to be the exception and where you want to get started. So that's like really important in weighing my vote, that building 1 is indicated.
And I agree, and I don't mind if we indicate building 1, but as soon as our parts come in very quickly, we're going to get building 2 to the same compliance with building and fire code. And when that comes, and this is a future discussion, but when that comes, whether all the minimum improvements are done or not, we would like to pull a permit on that one as well.
Well, and that's part of the concern, is setting the precedent. And in these days of supply chain issues, that this will come up over and over again. And so it's a bad precedent to start, because then we're going to be discussing this with all of the developers who are having supply chain issues.
Not only that, 3.1.1.2 gives you a blank check. I think it needs to have clarification, then not to just say building permits, but occupancy permits. I think there needs to be more definitive in there. And I think that needs to be explained better if we're going to make that modification. Because what you're asking us to do is sign a blank check for this development. And we're hesitant about doing that. You're telling us you're going to have a bin. We don't know. We can't sign you a blank check, but we can review it as time moves forward.
The purpose of the development agreement is just to establish things that aren't already established in the code. So you have the Providence City Code to protect you, you have building code to protect you, you have fire code to protect you, and you have Utah State Code to protect you. There's no need to put in the development agreement any possible requirement, because those requirements are already in place, if that makes sense.
Well, you're changing to occupancy from building permit.
Because
that is a big step. I'm sorry, it is a huge step. And whether it be building 1, building 2, building 3, I don't care how it's worded, but you're asking us to sign you a blank check on your development for occupancy permits. And personally, I'm not willing to do that.
And Brett, Amy, and Mike, maybe the term occupancy permit is troubling for some of the members of the council, and maybe the way we alter 3.1.1.2 is, rather than have it as occupancy there, we build in the ability to apply for a permit as soon as the fire marshal has sort of okayed it or whatever, right? Like, it sounds like we're maybe talking past each other a little bit. We're talking about the same issues, but from a different angle. And there's this concern about occupancy permit that's maybe, I think, a little bit misses the mark a little bit. And what we're more concerned about pulling the permit, and you're wanting to make sure we get to a certain point before we pull the permit. And we're not saying we don't want to get to that point. But Dan, is there a way to sort of recraft this to sort of say we're entitled to seek a permit as soon as we get sign off from the fire department on this?
Yeah, that would be acceptable for my end, as long as we let the building and the fire department sign off on that we're reaching their code compliance. If they sign off on it, a building permit is issued. I'd be fine with that.
Mike, does that make sense? If maybe we can massage this in a minimal sense that sort of allows the developer to apply for and obtain a building permit as soon as fire is signed off on an appropriate hydrant and access on that, basically that Four Seasons Road. And we're entitled to, once third parties like the city and the fire chief have signed off on fire and safety access, we're entitled to pull a permit for whether that's first building or second building or whatever, because those minimum improvements will have been met and there will be an opportunity to approve or deny from the appropriate third parties. And then as soon as we get past those.
I'm okay with that, but that's the council's call, right? Like, I have no legal objection to that, but that's the council's determination.
Does that help alleviate any concerns about the distinction between building permit and occupancy? That there are going to be improvements installed prior to the application of a building permit for any subsequent building. But if we perhaps put the language more focused on that.
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that too, because I think it's in the spirit of what our attorney was trying to do. And it's in the spirit of what Dan is trying to do, is to have this rolling option. So yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. If we just say all minimum improvements required to meet building and fire code, I think that solves.
Is that, and I don't know, Amy's a bit deeper in this than I am, is that too broad? I mean, or do we need to spell out Four Seasons Road and fire hydrant and crew
Well, we
access?
can spell it out because you're going to do that anyway, right? I mean,
Right.
I heard you say that's going to happen at the beginning of the development anyway. So we should have no issue adding that in, because that's
Yeah, rather than use generic terms, let's make it maybe more specific. That way there's no confusion.
Yeah.
If that works.
For building one.
Just in general, like right now we're saying building one already complies with that. But as soon as we get a subsequent building up to that same standard where the fire department has signed off and the building department is saying like, you're ready to go, we can apply for, and we're not going to be granted a permit unless those things have been signed off.
I think we're coming to a good compromise, but I'm wondering where this is a potential legal problem, if we should go into executive session just for a few minutes and talk about it as a council, so that we can get in on the same page and consult with our attorney so that we don't get ourselves into trouble.
Can we do that? I know we can enter executive session for imminent legal action, purchase of property. Can our attorney advise if we can do that?
It's threatened legal. They really haven't made a legal demand per se, but I think the likelihood of litigation is out there on this case.
Litigation has definitely been mentioned.
Especially the damages.
The damages, Gavin brought that up today. So we think we'd be within our rights to enter executive session.
I think so, based upon that.
Mayor, may I make a motion that we move into executive session for a moment?
I'll second it. We have a motion by Josh, second by Carrie. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we'll go into executive session. Those